Shannon with Pot O'Gold Kustoms here. One of the many things we do at my shop is wiring, complete wiring, tip to tail, all your services, all the elements, all the small pieces. All that stuff's really important when it comes to wiring. Things like the gauges. In this case, we're using Dakota Digital. Wiring harness, we're using American Autowire for this one. And there's also many other elements to this that you need to be thinking about, so like your stereo. This one actually runs a Holley sniper unit. So you have to think of what it needs, not only power demand-wise, but protection. So electromagnetic interference is a big deal with the Holley sniper units. Actually, most fuel injection is. With the stereo, you got the same idea. You don't want that squeaky alternator noise, so you end up routing your wires separately on other sides of the car or running some down the middle, just to kind of isolate them and keep them away from each other. The American Autowire harness, again, the reason we selected this is it comes with a lot of parts and pieces. So, for example, you got a new headlight switch, new dimmer switch, new ignition switch, and that kind of stuff you always need to think about when you're doing your wiring anyway. You may think it's just something as simple as a wiring harness, but when you get into some complex ideas like this, even though that's labeled, if you don't understand what this is for and how it's supposed to work out, you're just going to get lost. All right, so for what we're using for a harness on this one, being American Autowire, we're using one of their classic update series harnesses. So this comes with like relays and stuff to operate LED headlights as an example. Many different kits have many different options, but American Autowire covers a lot of it. So the instructions here you'll see kind of gives you pretty much step-by-step, shows you what kind of tools you need, shows you kind of where things are located, what the relays are for. Pretty detailed, so you actually have color photos, which I really like. So you can really get kind of dialed in on exactly where you're trying to get things routed. So they have done it in real time, installed it in real time, and documented it accordingly. Even then, very easy understood instructions on how things plug in, what's extra, what you can add if you want to add things to it. In this case, we're actually coupling it with Dakota Digital. So we're actually installing their RTX series gauges in this one. And we're doing that because we want something that's classic. The car isn't necessarily a muscle car in this case. It's only a 6-cylinder. It's just a good cruiser. But we still want something that's reliable, programmable, works with the harness, works with the stereo, works with the fuel injection even. So with this, we're actually using the BIM module from Dakota to transcribe everything from the Holley sniper unit into the Dakota Digital and into the harness, all kind of spidered into each other. So it takes a lot of planning. In other words, you want to know everything you're going to want to do. So if you're doing stereo, it's a good time to do it at the same time, and what size and what kind of power demand. Got to think about your alternator. That's something a lot of people skip. So if you got big power and you're sucking a lot of power, like let's say electric fans, twin electric fans, you got a big stereo, air conditioning's running, all that kind of stuff equals a big power drain. So the more availability you have for that, such as a high amp alternator, like say 100, 200 amp alternator, that's something you need to be thinking about during this process of setup. You want to know what kind of gauges you want, what kind of radio you want, what kind of ignition switch you're going to run, fuel injection. All that stuff is very, very important to what you're going for in the end. Okay, most of the reason why I prefer to do as much electrical install at one time as possible is how much you take it apart. So here we have the passenger seat out, the rear seat out, door panels, interior quarter panels, and that's just to get to the basic wiring harness. Now ironically, that's about the same time you can have access to your speaker locations, wiring routing for that, anything for the fuel injection, lighting, changing your lighting is a good time as well. And all that stuff you can have access to easily by taking all that stuff apart. Last thing you want to do is be crunched under a dashboard, so that's why we pull the seat out. We've removed a lot of the headlight stuff, so you see we've left the bucket, but we're also looking at things more than just the light. What I mean by that is in here you've got your adjustment screws, you got the springs, the condition of the bucket itself. If you're trying to update or change any of this stuff, sometimes this needs modified, and if you have to change any of it or adjust any of it, you're at risk for breaking things if it's old. So you want to look at your headlight adjustment screws, springs, buckets, any of that kind of related stuff. All right, engine bay stuff really kind of coincides with how you're routing things, what kind of gauges you're using stock heater, aftermarket air conditioning, all that stuff ties in together. So in the engine bay, you've got things like the starter solenoid in this case, you got your battery location. This one has a stock alternator that'll likely be replaced. We do have a fuel injection system, Holley Sniper, a little baby unit, but it works well. This one actually has a points eliminator kit in it as well. So all that you got to be kind of thinking about while you're designing your wiring and selecting what you're wanting to use. The American Autowire harness we chose for this is pretty much a direct plug and play for the most part, but it also comes with updates such as the relays for the headlights, because we're running a super powered headlight, but we don't want something that's going to like drain all the power out of the rest of the system, hence the alternator idea. So another crucial step is taking it apart. You don't want to get in there and chop everything up. So in this case, the stock harness was okay. It was brittle, which is why we're replacing it. But what we did was everything we removed, we labeled and we indicated not only where it came from, but the condition of it. Like the dimmer switch is really sticky, so that's probably not a good one. The dome light switches are just plastic. They're cheap. Maybe it's worth replacing at that time because you're doing the same work. You understand that when you replace small stuff like this, you have to put it back anyway. So all you're paying for is a part difference during the labor. So here we've got all sorts of things labeled. We got console parts, we got gauge parts. And most of this stuff is factory and it's labeled that way. And even with the wiring, you'll see it's got like left reverse. You've got turn signals. You got headlight, dash cluster. Most of this stuff has been completely labeled, and that way when you're comparing to your new stuff, you know exactly where it goes. Because sometimes the plugs aren't the same. So like as an example, these molded plugs you can't usually get in an aftermarket setting. It'll probably have a different style plug, so if you don't understand the difference or it doesn't visibly make sense, if you labeled it when you were taking it apart, when you're reading your instruction manual, they'll kind of help you out to understand where you're supposed to be going with it. The goal is you want to make it as easy as you can. So by using products like American Autowire, Dakota Digital, it takes a lot of the hard brain work, if you will, out of it, especially with these easy to follow instructions, plug and play type setups. Even though it's simple, so like this car is only a 6-cylinder, it's a very basic fuel injection system. This one is still pretty complex in design. So you want to make sure you have your parts figured out, what you're using. You want to have a lot of forethought on what the completed job is going to be. You always start thinking about where you're going to finish. In this case, we just want a decent stereo, reliable gauges, lights that are a little bit brighter that work good, and LEDs on everything for low impedance, better voltage, etc. So again, even though this looks really scary, because it can be, this kind of using these simpler parts kind of breaks it down for you. So we have more coming on this soon. Follow our YouTube channel, give us a like, subscribe, follow us. We have a lot more coming on this real soon.